Welcome back to Mozzie Sales. We've had the first day of the America's Cup match. Two races, one apiece for the two teams. And yeah, I think maybe not as exciting a racing as I could have hoped for, but certainly the teams are much closely matched than I expected. And I think a lot of people, even maybe the guys at Luna Rossa, kind of surprised at how close the two teams are. I think what I wasn't surprised about was Luna Rossa's tacking seemed better than Emirates Team New Zealand, and definitely Luna Rossa, when they could get their nose ahead, instigate the tacking duels, it was really difficult for Emirates Team New Zealand to get around. Still think the Kiwis do have a slight speed advantage upwind in VMG, and I'd expect that to grow a little bit up the range. And were really quick downwind as well. I say quick downwind, I think they were just more that they were low. They held deeper angles downwind. In the start, fairly even, a bit of mistake from Luna Rossa. They obviously had a little bit of distance to kill to the line, a little bit of time to kill, and they did a little duck down and then head up for the gun. Just mistimed that trigger, let New Zealand get the jump on them, but otherwise fairly even start. If anything, I thought Luna Rossa were more kind of controlling that and looked good. Just a little bit of mistiming. These things happen. Second start, Team New Zealand, I don't disagree with the strategy of coming up and going for the tack, but they dropped off the fours in that tack, and I think it just then all made it a little bit rushed as they came back to try and attack Luna Rossa. And actually, as we've seen so many times, like, going for the push and the hook is really difficult, really hard to pull off. And I just think they were a bit slow to realise that actually they just needed to head up, and they were pretty much on time to be racing. Maybe a little bit of communication in the boat. I'm not sure that was conveyed to Pete when he was looking at getting behind and doing the last duck and push on Luna Rossa. Jimmy just sees them go for the duck and the push, and he's just like, no, we're racing. I think Bruni calls it as well, so they just head up and go. First race, probably the big mistake for Luna Rossa, there wasn't really the start. Yeah, Emirates Team New Zealand got the better jump, but a bit of a time distance error, fractions of second out on the trigger. These things happen, but I think for Luna Rossa, what I'd be really disappointed in that race about was the luff that Jimmy did. I've said it on this channel before, I don't really like these luffs to get penalties. The value of penalties is so low, and again, I've made a video complaining about that, but the value of penalties is so low, it's just not worth it. And this was a great example of where Jimmy could potentially get a 50-meter gain if he got a penalty, but he risked losing 150, 200 meters, splashing down, having to do that rebuild. It's just not worth it. And the rules are written. I mean, I can criticize the rules, and I do criticize the rules, but one thing they do is discourage like aggressive team racing, match racing tactics, because it's just not worth it. So just look at this as pure risk reward. They're 20 metres behind, and if they get a penalty on New Zealand, New Zealand will have to go 50 metres behind them. So the total reward possible is 70 metres. The risk, as we see, they drop back 100 metres, they fail, they don't get the penalty, they drop off the foils. So 100 metres is the risk. So that's 70 to 100. That means really you want this move to be a 60 or 70% chance of working for you to take the risk, because that's how the risk and reward weighs up. Jimmy should know that. He should know that that's a really low value move, those kind of luffs by now, and you don't really get anything from the umpire. So yeah, I think that would be the one thing that was really like a foreseeable kind of like clangor of a mistake from them, and it did kind of nullify a lot of the race. Luna Rossa actually with a bit better sailing on the shifts, I think we're coming back into Team New Zealand, and you kind of think, oof, what if they hadn't have messed up that luff, then they maybe could have closed that gap a little bit earlier, started doing a few tacks to try and split from Team New Zealand, goad New Zealand into doing a few more tacks themselves and squish up that difference. So yeah, I think that was probably the mistake of the day. But and if anything, I think it kind of shows how Luna Rossa's mindset. I think they kind of believed the hype of the press. Everyone's saying that Team New Zealand had a faster boat. So once New Zealand were off the line and ahead, I think it was just a bit of desperation from Ginny rather than a cold, calculated match racing move. So yeah, I found that quite interesting. Then actually, the second, halfway through that race, they probably realised, no, we've actually got really good pace. We don't have to be clutching at straws like that. And second time around, just a lot more consistent. Yeah, sailed a pretty good race. I think only mistake really was the JK around the bottom mark. To be honest, I don't think that was really a mistake. I think that was a good. Looking at it, they were in left phase, so a JK is a good move to move. Yeah, it didn't pay out this time, but you would normally expect that, get onto the lifted tack straight away. The chances are it's going to head from there, but it didn't. It lifted a bit, let New Zealand in. So in retrospect, it's a mistake, but I can't really fault the call on that JK. I think, if you look at it as just a numbers game, percentage move, that was the percentage move. And, sometimes, that's what risk is. So yeah, really interesting day. The other big thing that I took away from today was Team New Zealand weren't actually too bad in a high mode. They managed to hold on to a few very skinny lanes, and there's something about the data coming off the boat which is very, very different to the World Series. World Series, Emirates Team New Zealand were locked in with their foil cant angle, 64 degrees wind, pretty much regardless of whatever was going on around them. They were just locking in that cant angle and trimming everything else to keep the balance. But they were really playing around with the cant angle today. It was bouncing around from kind of like high 50s up to like high 60s. That's a hell of a lot of cant, and they were doing that especially into tacks. Maybe these new foils just need a little bit more speed going into the tacks, but they were really canting out going into the tacks, and even just switching modes a little bit. Why that is, why they chose a shift in the modes. They've also got a shift in the foils. They've got these foils a little bit shorter in the arm and have a little bit of pre-bend in them. So yeah, maybe trying to get a bit of that righty moment back by using a bit more cant, but it's very marginal. I don't know what's gone on there. I'm gonna have to delve into the data somewhere, but I also think the fact that they're using cant angle a lot more. I was kind of surprised at World Series. One of the things I found was funny was Ineos were using lots of cant angle changes and having issues with their foil cant system. And when asked, Emirates Team New Zealand's like, well, what do you want to know? It just goes down and that's it. And that's how they were using their cant at the World Series. They were just locking it down and setting it. So maybe actually New Zealand have seen what the other teams are doing with this cant system, and they're kind of really using that cant system for probably more often than what the initial design was meant for. So maybe that's an area where Team New Zealand didn't fully grasp the kind of inappropriate use or unintended use of the cant system. They thought it'd just be set and forget, but the other teams certainly aren't. They've been moving it around, and now New Zealand have gone away, built a new set of foils which can be used with a more variable cant system, and they're still trying to figure out where the optimums are in that. The actual races themselves after the starts were pretty stale. We really saw how it played out between the teams. When New Zealand got ahead, they weren't bothered about covering. They just tried to stretch a little bit with boat speed. Then in converse, in the second race, when Luna Rossa got ahead, they preserved that lead with tacking on the opponent and using their manoeuvrability. So that's kind of what we expected to see. I think it was a bit closer than what we expected. The actual races kind of played out to a very obvious formula after the start. So I'm kind of looking forward to, fingers crossed they can get out onto course C. I'm not sure what the situation is with COVID and whether that course will open up and whether the restrictions will change, but I'd kind of like to see some shiftier shiftier racing just from a spectator point of view. I don't think it would necessarily, shiftier racing would necessarily favour one team over another. Especially maybe it might favour Luna Rossa a little bit more with the manoeuvrability. I don't know, but I think it just make better races. We'd possibly see a few more passes. But yeah, anyway, can't wait for more racing on Friday. Gonna have to be up again early UK time and catch that. Okay, take care. Bye.